And we are live. What's going on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube Live? It is your man, Coach Rowe. Today is Tuesday. We are back for the second season of the Men's Circle. The Men's Circle. I have to do it like the Transformers do. The Men's Circle. So happy to be back. Season 1 was absolutely phenomenal. I have to actually say that I missed having the Men's Circle while I was on break. But absolutely needed the break because life was taking place in the interim. But with that being said, let's jump straight into tonight's topic. Tonight's topic is going to be triggering events. Why are we always so triggered, right? As always, before we talk about the topic, I want to give these are all returning brothers to the Men's Circle. All of my returning brothers to the Men's Circle an opportunity to introduce themselves. And while you're doing your introduction, say a little bit about what this topic means to you. I'm going to start with you, cousin, because you're on my upper right-hand side. What does, well, say a little bit about yourself. I already said your family, but, also what does the topic mean to you?
All right. Can you guys hear me okay?
Perfect.
Yeah, we had cousin Billy and I are our first cousins. We are definitely family. But when I got this email from you, Billy, about the topic, it didn't trigger anything, but certainly I felt a little uneasy because we all have triggers, and for me, it took me a while to understand my physiological reaction to what I was going through, right? I didn't recognize it or acknowledge it as a trigger. But when I did, I started to be intentional about not placing myself in spaces where I will likely encounter a trigger, right? So, I mean, this is, and I mean, as we're going to talk about this more, and it allows me to prevent others around me from having triggering events based on things that I do. And that was one of the things I didn't recognize until one of my little ones kind of brought some things up to me that made me think, okay, there's something I'm doing here that potentially could be a trigger for her down the road. So I had to be more intentional about understanding my own triggers. And so I wouldn't, present triggers for others, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. Actually, one of the things that I had written down on a piece of paper because I didn't have time to do digital notes, but that makes perfect sense. So we will actually dive into that a little bit. The reactivity to our triggers. My wife and I talk about this often. Sometimes we'll be in arguments and we just go in circles, and it's because my trigger triggers her trigger, which then
exactly
which then triggers her trigger. And so you never get off that hamster wheel until you identify, okay, we're both being triggered here. And I'm going to be honest, normally she's the one who identifies that, hey, we're triggering each other. Normally I'm like, I'm willing to play this game until I can't feel my tongue. So, Bruce, I got you up next. Go ahead and introduce yourself and what the topic means to you.
My name is Bruce Gatewood. Me and Billy go way back. Middle school, I'm pretty sure middle school. I love the topic because when I got the email, the thing that I thought of immediately was triggering events for me in the present time. I can't say in the past it wasn't good, but in the present time on the journey I'm on, triggering events are an opportunity for me to display the emotional maturity that future Bruce has when I see him. You know what I mean? So for me, triggering events used to be such a letdown, such a dark cloud bringing type event. but now learning to control my emotions. And like you said, that hamster wheel that you get on with your wife. Yep, 20 years of marriage, we've been there. But I noticed when I recognize and control my emotions, it deads most of it. Because now she just want to be mad, but she can't be because I'm not mad. You know, once you take yourself out of it, and it's like, okay, sweetheart, maybe we're having a misunderstanding, but just not being triggered. So for me, every triggering event for me gives me an opportunity to be the guy I want to be for real, for real.
I love that opportunity to display who you want to be as future Bruce. That's I like that. Tim, I got you up next.
Tim Rushing. How I know Rose. I like to joke. Brother from another mother, pretty much. I don't have a memory that doesn't involve him really at some extent, as far as back as I can go. But the triggering thing. The triggering thing is really interesting because it's kind of like the doorstep and the porch to the things that you got to work on in your mind. It's kind of like the smoke detector. I guess that's why they call it triggering, because, man, it's funny when I go back and I look at this and the work I have done and the work I'm still yet to do. It's exactly what you described, bro. It's like you're playing this game of trigger hot potato. You push my button, I push your button. Okay, you're back to me, back to you. Who's going to break first? And you start realizing that there is no game and there is no win at the end of the day. You could win and you could feel like you lost if you go down that road. So what it means to me is, it means, like I think you said it too, Bruce, it's an opportunity to improve every time. And I love what you said, Brian, which is learning you so you don't cause the triggering event in others. Man, that's powerful. I don't think not to throw shade or anything, but I don't think you're getting that from the women's circle. Just saying.
We just gonna start off season 2 with some fights. All right, hey, I'm with it. Brother Glenn, G Money, I see you over there. You got your blazer on. Go ahead and introduce yourself, and what does the topic mean to you?
Absolutely, man. First and foremost, fellas, good evening. Happy to be here on season 2. Ro, thanks again for the invite back. So that's a good thing, I'm guessing. But no, yeah. Regarding this particular topic, so I actually know Ro. I was introduced to him by my wife, probably 2000. I don't know. I feel like it was like 2010-ish. But I've known him for a while. But we recently reconnected about a year or so ago. But like I said, I've been kind of a fan of his behind the scenes, just kind of observing him through social media over the last few years, man. I think that we just have a lot of things that align up: our values, our vision, our beliefs. And so, it's always good to be connected with a solid individual, mastermind type individual whose wheels are always going. So, but aside from that, this particular topic, when I seen the email, I was just like, oh no. I was like, I thought I was vulnerable in season 1. I gotta dig a little deeper, because this particular word, triggering, when it comes to the Black and brown community specifically, this is something that we don't talk about. And so for many years, I've built up so many emotions to now being a lot more of a mature man. These conversations I never mind having, but to know that the 17-year-old Glenn, who could have had these conversations earlier and could have navigated differently through life emotionally, I appreciate this conversation because of now having kids, being able to share these conversations to them, right? And give them those conversations, those practical principles on how they can navigate earlier in their life. And so I feel like season 2, and particularly this particular topic, is more for me to kind of also be present, but be a student so that I can pass that information on to the next generation. So happy to be here. Looking forward to the conversation amongst you brothers.
I love it. I love that. Man, that you already know. So really quick, Glenn and I actually meet every Friday. We have a debrief every Friday for the most part. We won't for the next 2 Fridays because I'll be on vacation. And my wife isn't going to let me do debriefs on vacation. But we have a debrief every Friday, and a lot of our conversations fall into the lines of legacy, fall into the lines of what can we give back, fall into the lines of being mentors in the community. And so it's always good to be both the student and the teacher, and leaving the breadcrumbs for the future generation that's coming up behind you, that breadcrumbs that some of us, I'm not going to say some of us, many of us did not receive. We was just like, hey, there's the world, good luck. No source of direction, no compass, no, maybe a canteen. I remember the cartoons used to have the little stick with the bandana, and you had a little couple goodies wrapped in it. Maybe that, but for the most part, a lot of us were not given clear sights on what direction or what would be a healthy path to take. And so when I started thinking about, for me, this triggering event or triggering events, because it's not just one thing that triggers me, at least I'm going to speak for myself. It's not just one thing that triggers me. What really the topic began to mean to me is not only how do we identify them in ourselves, but how do we identify them in others so that we can be better at, this is going to sound super counterintuitive, but so that we can be better at not triggering ourselves. Going back to what you were saying, Tim, it's that game of hot potato. Well, they threw the potato to me. If I can understand my triggers and their triggers, I can begin to take a step back. Like I talk about in my book, I talk about reflect, identify, and then move. So if I can reflect on what I'm receiving, why they're giving me this angst or why they're pushing at that trigger, I can now say, okay, this is why they were probably triggered. This is what I did indirectly to trigger them. Now, how can I move through that? Or how do we take a break so that that trigger can kind of cool down a little bit before I go to touch it and burn my hand and then get triggered? And now I'm back into this trigger back and forth warfare. So for me, the triggering events were not just about identifying what triggers me, but really beginning to identify what triggers other people in an effort to not trigger myself. Tim, you've already touched on this a little bit. It also has to do with understanding the expectations that I have for myself are for me, and they're not necessarily compatible with expectations for other people. The challenge with that is, even though I don't have expectations for other people, and my wife and I get into this debacle, debate, argument, whatever you want to call it, we get into this quite often to where I have accepted who I am, what I'm willing to deal with, what I'm willing to do, whatever it may be. And sometimes she'll come in with expectations as from her perspective of who she wants me to be. And it's really hard because I'll try to be like in a place of Zen. I'll tell you all the time, my priority is my peace. That's my top priority. I need to stay in a state of peace, because once I get out of a state of peace, I just had a long work day today. I could imagine all it's going to take is a little bit and I'm cussing somebody out at work. So I try to keep myself in a state of peace because I don't want to be in this volatile, ready to blow stage like a volcano that's just been simmering, waiting to erupt. But back to my wife, sometimes she'll put her expectations that she has of herself on me, and they're not compatible with me. And I've noticed this trigger in myself to where I will maybe the first 3, 4, 5, 6 times be like, yeah, no, that's not what I want to do. Or no, I don't want to go there. No, whatever it may be. And she'll keep trying to push that narrative, which is from her perspective, on me. And sometimes it'll cause me to just, okay, apparently me just saying no thank you is not getting to you. It's like somebody hitting you in the head and you're like, no thank you, I don't want that. And they hit you in the head, no thank you, I don't want that. Well, you only gonna hit me so many times, and for me, you probably gonna only hit me once, and I would probably knock you out. Like, but you're only gonna hit me so many times, and I'm gonna say no thank you and turn that other cheek before a volatile event takes place. So my question that I would like to bring in to open up to the chat and open up to the circle is, first and foremost, how are you able to identify your individual triggers? Because I think we may not know all of them. Sometimes you don't know the trigger until somebody pushes it. But I do believe we know some of our triggers, and I would love to know what methods you have used, or how you came about figuring out what your triggers are, and then maybe what situations you found them.
I mean, I'll go first. I feel like we all know what takes us to a place, right? So like I've known my triggers for a long time. But I think the ones that hinder me the most probably came with either my personal relationships with my wife or children or relationships at work, right? And I think I was able to identify them by just really seeing the consequences of my reactions when I'm triggered. Because nobody really cares, right? Especially, I don't want to say nobody really cares. That's probably not the best way to say it, but it's hard for someone to care about what is going on that's wrong that you have a problem with if your triggers are causing you to cuss somebody out, right? So I had to identify basically how to convey an issue without flying off the handle, or else the shit that triggered me continued to trigger me because nothing would change, right? But I think it started with actually identifying why is this particular situation, why is it taking me there? But it's a lot, again, I think it starts with a lot of self-reflection, right? You have to start asking yourself these questions, right? Because if you're not asking the questions, you're not going to find the answers.
Yeah.
I could go.
Go ahead.
To me, I've identified there's a lot of triggers, man. Like there's emotional triggers that I have, and there's a lot of triggers that I don't mind, that I like that they're there. Like I lost my brother 23 years ago. He was a real big factor in my life. And anytime I watch anything that has to do with brothers, it gets me. And I don't want that feeling to go away. I like that trigger. It makes me remember him. So there's good triggers and there's bad triggers, but the trigger that I've been working on forever has been the anger trigger. And what I've noticed that really gets my anger going is when I feel I'm not being heard, and I feel that there's attempts at manipulation or someone to not be direct with me when I'm being very direct with them. I'll give you an example. This happened recently. She just came in and just completely sidetracked me. Frustration. Somebody stole my ice. Let me sound petty, but it's not. I got ice cream, right? And I'm like, ask me before you go into my ice cream, and just, I'm not going to trip if you have my ice cream. So I go downstairs. Someone puts the empty ice cream container back in the freezer. It's gone. They put the empty one in there. So that pisses me off because you're hitting all my triggers. You're manipulating me, making me think it's still in there, and it's not. If you just threw it away, and then told me, hey, I ate it, I've been like, man, oh, okay. And next time, can you at least tell me that you ate it so I don't have my heart set on ice cream the whole damn day, and then come to find out that. But when I asked the kids in the house, because I know my wife didn't do it, because we like very different ice creams. But when I asked the kids who ate the ice cream, guess what the response was? Not me. So we have an ice cream ghost in my house. So the not being straight with me really, 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 really rubs me the wrong way. But what I've gotten better at is identifying the frustration behind it. So when I start feeling frustrated, I start questioning, is the frustration level and the anger level that's being built, is it necessary for the situation I'm in? Now that she's gone, I'll bring up the other one because it's more a little bit more serious. Not serious, but I had somebody reach out to me that was an old coworker. She still works at my company, but I'm a supervisor now. She's in a different path, but she stated that she wanted some help getting to where I'm at, and she wanted to pick my brain about that. So I was like, sure, book some time with me on an Outlook calendar invite, and I'll meet with you as long as it's cool with your boss. And so we're in there, and she's like, I really always admired, I always heard your work and seen what you did, and I was always really impressed. Da, 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 da. And then it gets down to where we're talking about things that she's interested in, how to prepare for interviews, what skills that she needs to develop before she goes for said roles. And she's like, we really should continue this conversation over drinks sometime. And I'm like, I'm going to let that pass and whatever. And then she goes, I really think that we will really, really help each other out. And I was like, all right. Because at that point, it's funny because sometimes people think that they're being like cool with something, but they don't understand they hit a trigger with you. I don't like being manipulated. So I took that as kind of like an attack on my character. Like, you think now, I'm married. You're over here talking about, I hope you have fun in your vacation in Mexico in a week with your wife. So I'm married. And you're asking me to risk, not only because you're a subordinate, you're not directly reporting to me, but you're below me. Now you're risking me on multiple phases of my life. You're risking my career, my marriage. You thought that I was that kind of dude? You thought you could just really come in and dangle the carrot in front of me, and it really rubbed me the wrong way. So I cut her off, and I was like, listen, let's pretend this never happened. Let's pretend the last 3 minutes never happened, and let's never bring them up again, because you kind of offended me. You really think that I'm that type of individual that would, one, manipulate my position to get in favor in that way with a subordinate. Two, you think that even if we were colleagues, or even if we didn't work together, you think that I'm the type that would step out on my family. I was like, we can't really recover from this. I wish you the best in all that you pursue. And I left it at that. So I shared that with my wife, and she was ready to confront the woman and all. I was like, listen, I handled it on my own. The best thing I could get from you is, it's cringy to me. Can we just let it die? Not everything has to have the final chapter written. Can we let it die? I handled it, and I verified that, on my team's messages, the chain of events was initiated by her. So if it ever went to anything, like, look, she reached out to me, she proposed this, I shot it down, I shared it with my wife. You want to talk to her? There's nothing that she has. Plus, they could screen grab what I do anyway. So go ahead, listen to the conversation. Burn 30 minutes if you want. But I recognize those things, and I start questioning, is my level of anger, does it merit the situation? The ice cream, it didn't, but this, it kind of did. But I didn't come at her with anger. It was just more like disappointment. And learning how to navigate those feelings has been really crucial to me, especially the last 5-6 years. Man, that was a lot. So I'll turn it over to you.
Nah, it's all good. I feel it.
You see, I needed this, Ro. You see why we needed this? Like, it's been two weeks too long.
I can share a little bit about how I was able to identify my triggers. Obviously, there are some triggers I have that I know and that I've known for a while. And those, like I said before, I intentionally put myself in spaces where I can avoid those. And then there's times where I can't avoid them, right? But within that space, I try to carve myself out some space so I can have some peace. I can tell you, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I didn't know what a trigger was. And so when I start having physiological or physical or emotional responses to things, the result wasn't a good result. It was typically impulsive. Sometimes it was violent. It was different, right? But like you, Tim, as I've gotten older, I've kind of, when I start feeling a certain way, I ask myself, is it really worth it? And to give you an example, when the kids go into the refrigerator and they drink the drink in the pitcher all the way down to the bottom where it'll fit in their cup, but if they take it all, they have to make another pitcher. So they don't want to make another pitcher. So when you go in there, there's like this much juice in the pitcher. And when I first saw that, and my wife would tell you, my reaction wasn't a good reaction. And then I had to tell myself, dude, this is just a drink. It's a soft drink. They're kids. They'll probably want to get back to their video games. Just make another picture. So I just make another picture. So some of them are triggers, but I really have to tell myself, Brian, you're tripping. Even at work. So my thing is, and Billy, you talked about peace, and that's something that I will shut down family, whomever, to find my and to maintain and keep my peace. Um, uh, and one of the things that I've realized that triggers me is when someone takes 10 minutes to tell me something they could have told me in one. To me, you're wasting my time. Whether it's at work, whether it's as my wife, and she's long-winded, and I know she's long-winded, right? And I know it's gonna take her 2 hours to tell me something she could have told me in 2 minutes. And so, but I found myself, kind of rationalizing that and not getting myself worked up behind that because I know that's a trigger for me. And I don't want to put the onus on someone else to manage my emotions, to manage my reaction to them. So I have to manage it internally. So understanding what that trigger is helps me with that. So, I know some of my triggers. And so I would imagine tomorrow I may, find that there's another one somewhere and I'll manage it. But I can tell you, I can manage those responses, the feelings I have regarding some things a lot better today than I could 30 years ago.
Man, cousin, you preaching. I just got in trouble last week for my wife and I was having a conversation, and I asked her a question to kind of clarify what she was saying. And she went down this rabbit hole, and I was like, stop. I don't need any of that. I just needed you to answer a yes or no question. You answered the question that gave me the information I need. I don't need to go down the hypothetical steps. And she's like, in her mind, she's like, again, this is where those triggers come in. She's like, you don't listen to me. You're not hearing me. You don't let me speak. You don't let me get out what I need to get out. And I'm like, no, I got all the information that I needed. But that's a trigger for me because I grew up in a household, and it's funny because I do this with my kids sometimes, and I have to catch myself. I grew up in a household where my dad would give these long lectures, and it was like, yo, just tell me to clean my room and I'm grounded. Like, I don't need to talk to you for 45 minutes. And so that's a trigger for me when I feel conversations are going down this path where it's like, this is unnecessary. And now as an adult, you feel like you have some authority and power over your time, and you do in some ways, but you don't have to be rude about it. And so being able to kind of take that perspective from my wife having the conversation with me and say, this is a pitcher of juice. This is one conversation that we're going to have in the entirety of our marriage. It's a sip of juice in this pitcher. And being able to see that in the moment can help disperse some of that angst or that anger or that frustration. I love, because one of the questions in the chat, really quick, I want to bring it in. Casual said, what if you can't identify your triggers? I love that you bring in the physiology. I'm going to mess up this word. Physiological. Is that it?
Physiological.
There we go. I was like, dang, I can't see the word. Physiological. Things that happen when your triggers are being poked at. Before they hit the button, you'll feel that bead of sweat that feels like it's forming on your head. You'll feel a little dizzy. You'll feel warm. You'll feel sometimes you'll feel numb, emotionally numb, because that trigger's getting ready to blanket over all the emotions that you could possibly feel. You'll feel those things. And sometimes it will happen so fast you don't get the chance to say, oh, shoot, somebody may have tapped my trigger or is getting ready to tap my trigger. But if you take time, and I love that you said this, Bruce, if you take time to reflect on the aftermath, sometimes that's where we start at. We start at the aftermath. We don't have the tool belt or the hammer, we don't have the hammer, the screwdriver, and the flathead screwdriver to be able to truly handle the situation preventatively. So because we can't be preemptive in our approach, sometimes we have to take a step back and look at the aftermath and say, you know what? When I blew up about that juice, was that really necessary? Tim, a lot like you, I don't like being manipulated. And for me, when you lie, that is manipulation, because you're trying to get something that either you feel like you wouldn't get if you told the truth, or you're trying to manipulate me to do something that I wouldn't do if you feel like I wouldn't do if I knew the truth. 9 times out of 10, if I want to do something, I'm going to do it regardless of if you tell me the truth. But when you lie, you can ask my oldest son. We used to have a you lie belt in my closet. Oh, so you're gonna lie? Okay, well, I don't know what to tell you. You know what liars get in this house, so you want to tell the truth? I'll give you a second chance. You want to tell the truth? And normally that would lead to him being like, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and tell the truth because dad typically finds out the truth. But what I found in that is that for me, when you lie, especially with kids, when you have kids who lie all the time, it feels like when you have kids that are lying to you and you have this trigger about being manipulated and it's attached to lying, you can overreact unnecessarily. And it's like, gosh, you know, at the end of the day, I asked, did you close the door? They lied and said, oh, yeah, I checked or I locked the door. And now you're blowing up on your kid because they lied about they locked the door. And so you got to really start to try to figure out if that's who you want to be. So really quick before you go, Glenn, Bruce, when you said the future Bruce, are these emotions in alignment? Are these actions in alignment with the future Bruce? That's really the aftermath work that you're doing. You're saying, hey, look, now that I'm in a cooler state and this is the state that I like to be in, were those actions in alignment with being in this state and maintaining this state? And 9 times out of 10, when you're reactive to a trigger, the answer is no. Go ahead, Glenn.
And Glenn, I'm so sorry, Glenn. Glenn, I'm sorry, brother. Listen, so the question by Casual, such a fantastic question because I had a problem identifying it, right? Like, I know that I'm getting ready to snap. I know it because I'm talking to you and you're saying things. And what I would always say to my kids, to my wife, to my brothers, to whoever I'm talking to, I would say the same thing. I feel my tongue sharpening. My tongue is sharpening right now in my mouth. And it never hit me that, hey, Bruce, you're about to snap. And it's weird. That was one of the ways that I identified a trigger. But and then it ties into what Tim said. But is this amount of anger you're about to set forth that you don't get to give it? Like, the one thing that I have daughters, and 17 and 19, and daughters change you. Because when you say these hurtful things that I know, because when I go there, boy, listen, when I go there, I'm going there, right? Now I'm trying to hurt your feelings. But having my daughters and feeling my tongue sharpening and asking myself, is this going to be worth it? And then remembering the times where I kind of, flipped out and the look in their face, like, damn, Bruce, you don't get that back. And I say it all the time. So for so long, they only knew me as Rage Dad. Dad, you're always raging. Dad, you're always raging. And even though my messages, my triggers, and what came forth, even if it was, a little mean sometimes, it was always in good faith and good. Like, I love you. I'm trying to give you the tools to be better. You're not listening. Now I got to say it like this. But it's just crazy. When you think about it and you reflect on it, it may seem hard at first to identify those triggers. If I can't identify, you can identify them because they're there, because we're humans, we're creatures of habit. It's always the same. Well, for me, for sure. The pattern's always the same. And that's when my tongue is sharpening. Oh shit. This is about to get randy. Let me calm down, Bruce. Calm down. Take a step back. Things like that. Sorry, Glenn.
No, man, it's all good. This is therapeutic, for the table and for the audience. It's funny, as each of you said something, I was like, man, like trigger. Like I can relate. So I'm a kind of a cousin that mentioned something. I was like, man, I might have to go home and check the pulse of my home. Like, one of the things I like to do is talk to my wife. And sometimes I can get long-winded with my stories. And I know she's hey, like not really to me, but just in general, she's I just want you to get to the point, right? And so, and then even talking about the kids, I was like, man, sometimes I could have just said, yeah, go clean your room or go. But sometimes I am making a life lesson about it. And as Billy was mentioning, I was like, I wonder if my kids are in the back of their mind like that. Like, we already know this. Just tell us to clean our room so we can go and go knock this out. But regarding triggers specifically, I can actually relate to today. Like today, like where I am today is because I'm sitting here at the there's a man-made lake in a coffee shop, and so I've been running my last couple of appointments out here because I was trying to do it at home, and it was so much like, for whatever reason, my kids were on 100 today. Well, they're on 100 every day. They were on like 101 today, but it was just like, I couldn't get any mental clarity. I couldn't get focused. I was just like, this is not going to be good for the house. Right. And so I was telling my wife, I was like, hey, I'm gonna go to the coffee shop. I'm gonna go to One Lake, and I'm gonna just go out there, read some stuff, run my appointments from there. And I'm glad that I did, because I was triggered there of so many like angry and negative thoughts, because I was trying to be productive from a business aspect, and I couldn't create that environment in the home where I normally am able to do that. And so it was very frustrating, right? And so I was just like, either I snap, and the one thing I don't want is for my kids to be like, man, every time dad couldn't control his emotions, he snapped at the house, right? And so for me, being able to be aware of when I'm triggered, it was easy for me just to make the decision like, hey, Glenn, the environment that you're in is not conducive to what you're trying to accomplish. So control what you can control. You can't control your kids being on 101. What you can control is change your environment. And so to kind of tie that back into the question that was asked in the chat, which is a great question, because most people, what I've found is that they don't know. They're like, hey, what happens when I don't know when I'm triggered? And so my response to that would be, just through experience of being on that side of the fence and now being on the other side, is you have to take time to sit with yourself and figure out not even just who you are, but what things, like, what do you feel when you're in certain situations? And I think that the more time that you spend with yourself, the more aware you can become. And then so whenever you're in environments that trigger you, it's easy for you to, number one, identify that you're being triggered, and two, you being able to make a decision to control what you can control. And so while life isn't perfect, I will say that being able to identify my triggers and having to remove myself from the environment has been helpful, at least the last couple of years, because I feel like these last 2 years I've been really, really triggered, because I retired from the military and I'm working from home. We homeschool our kids. There's a lot that goes into that environment of newness, and from my expectation of trying to have a quiet home when that's not our lifestyle, right? Like, what kind of expectations am I setting for my kids and for the home? And so you guys are saying things. I was like, man, like, I could relate to that within a whole 24 hours. But again, great question in the chat. Like, what do you do when you don't know what triggers you? I would say spend more time sitting with yourself and get intentional with doing that.
Yeah.
I got to answer something I want to get off my chest about the question. How were you able to identify? Real quick. I have this method. I've read up on it. I don't know if any of you are familiar. It's called the 5 whys. And it's you do the 5 whys when you're trying to identify a root cause of something. So the story goes, and I'll give you like a short rendition of it, is someone was paid to come in and cut costs because they were spending too much on the upkeep of the tall one, the Washington Memorial, the tall one the Washington Memorial, right? The tall obelisk looking one in Washington. Their upkeep on it was too high. So they're like, we need you to go in and figure out why we're spending so much. So the person goes in there and they're like, okay, what's causing the bill so high? And they're like, okay, the lighting is causing they said getting rid of the birds costs a lot of money. And so the person was like, okay, why are birds so attracted to this? And they're like, well, there's an insect that grows here that the birds are attracted to. And they were like, okay, so why haven't we did anything with the pesticides? And they were like, well, we did, but the pesticides attract a different type of rodent that the birds like as well, so it doesn't really treat anything. And they're like, okay, but why? And it gets to the point to where it was able to be solved if they just get some lights. And they just shine some lights at certain points of the day and the birds go away. You don't have to have all these other layers of things. So I would recommend doing the 5 whys, meaning when you feel the urge and the anger, why am I angry? Okay, I'm angry because the person lied to me. Okay, but why does that lie make you mad? And then dig deep into what really caused it. Like I told you, one of mine was not feeling like you're not heard. And after doing this with myself in this reflection, I realized that the reason why I don't like not feeling heard is because I was the youngest of six and nobody ever gave my opinion any type of validation, even when I was right. I would say things, the whole household would be like, "You're just the youngest, you don't know what you're talking about," and I'd be right all the damn time, and it used to frustrate me. And I guess when I don't feel listened to or nobody pays attention to that, it takes me back to that younger version of me's irritation and anger, just in the grown-up body. So to answer your question, casual, do a quick little 5 why on yourself. Do some deep digging on and try to dig to that root cause of what's causing those feelings.
Man, all great things. I think the only other thing for me when it comes to identifying your triggers, sometimes your consequences help you identify your triggers. And that is absolutely probably the worst way to identify your triggers, is to experience significant or severe consequences that force you to choose. Nothing can force you to do anything, but it can force you to choose to actually reflect on why you're in the situation that you're in. I think I do so many thoughts of the day. I can't remember what thought of the day that I'm on in my mind, but one of the thoughts of the day that I was having was about looking at where my life is now. And really I'm in this like super grateful place. There's not everything's going right, but I'm in this super grateful place for where life is for me right now. And part of that has come because of the ability to clear my mind and create mental clarity. So now when you talk about manifesting thoughts, manifesting into reality, when you talk about that, or when I talk about that, there's a lot less delay. And a really good example of this is even with my wife and I. So my wife and I had a conversation, I'm going to say maybe 2 years ago, maybe 2 to 3 years ago, about retirement. And in that conversation, I told her, look, I want to get a couple of properties because I work for the private sector. I don't have no pension coming. And in that conversation, because of the mental clarity that I had and the discipline that I have been working on for years before that, it was just like, okay, cool. And then it was like, boom, we bought a house. And then it was like, boom, we bought another house. And then it was like, oh, darn, we have to sell that house. And instead of being triggered that I had to sell the house, it was just like, okay, well, we'll pull those proceeds, we'll have them. And then when we get the opportunity to buy another house, we'll buy another house. And now we're getting ready to buy another house. And so it's just like, as you do the work, it's strenuous work. I don't want you to think managing triggers and trying to resolve triggers is something that's just going to be easy. Oh, I found out what my trigger is. I'm no longer going to be triggered by that. Nah, I still have a trigger from if you slap me, you can expect hands down. You slap me across my face, these hands are flying every single time. So I tell people all the time, hey, don't slap me. It's a known trigger and I don't have a known resolution to it. So it is in our best interest that if you are mad at me, you find some other way to voice that. Even if it's physical, you go you're probably better off throwing a pan at me. I could dodge the pan or maybe get hit by the pan. But if you slap me, there's nothing that I've learned yet about myself that says, Billy, stay calm and just take a breath. Nothing in me has that ability yet. So with that, I do want to move on to the next question that I had. And it came actually from what you said in the beginning, Tim. I believe that our triggers are defensive and offensive mechanisms. They are designed to either repel or attack. And both, you can either, defend or attack. And because of that, Tim, you said earlier about, at the end of the day, really, what are you trying to win with this trigger? Like, what are you trying to win? And so that was the question that came to me is, when you find yourself in a triggered state and you've already flown off the reservation, what do you feel that your trigger is trying to win for you in that moment? Tim, you said the younger child who wasn't heard. Yeah, I'm trying to win a voice in that moment. But is that the way that you want your voice to be won?
Absolutely. That's the constant struggle. It's the when you I think you probably were very, very on the money with the repel or defend or attack or defend mentality. I think part of it when I really think about why my triggers come off the way they did and they do some certain points now, um, it's almost like I'm trying to create an event for that person so they know not to go down that road with me no more. And it's almost like when you go down this road with me and you piss me off, if you like dealing with this, then keep going. And keep playing this game, you keep getting the same prize. Um, but at the same time, sometimes that's a fool's errand. Like, not to go back to this damn ice cream story, but I brought my daughter down and I told her, I was like, because I went full. I was like, listen, y'all want to do this? Fine. I went full Denzel training day, but I was like, I'm eating everybody's snacks. Everybody. I don't care if whatever. Since nobody wants to admit it, everybody's stuff's up for grabs. And I kind of went in a little bit on them. And so they were like, man, that's messed up. You're going to eat my stuff. And I told my daughter, I was like, why do you think I'm really mad? Do you think it's the ice cream? And she was like, yeah, I think it's the ice cream. I was like, that's not it. It's the fact that when I ask questions, I don't get direct answers. I ask yes or no questions for a reason. And when you give me anything other than that yes or no, you're deflecting me, so I feel manipulated. And I gave her a full breakdown. She was like, well, man, that makes sense. And it was like, wow, the power of kind of talking it out, right? Instead of just going back and forth and having these deconstructive situations over tedious stuff over and over again. But that's the constant struggle. Like, do you want that? Is the need to be heard so great that it comes at all costs? That's the age-old question.
Yeah, that it comes at all snacks. You go eat all the stuff. I'm putting books on everybody.
I said, I don't even like Takis, but I'm eating yours. I don't even like salt and vinegar chips, but those are coming my way. Like, it's lemon Oreos. I think I might try that now.
Right.
So for me, it was something Tim said. So I'm going to talk about two different sides of it. Give me a second. Normally, what I'm trying to win when I'm triggered they're twofold. When it's a negative trigger, it's typically because I don't feel like you understand me, and it triggers me to anger when I'm not understood because I speak the proper King's English, right? Like I can, communicate well how I feel, what I want, what I need, right? So when I'm having a conversation and I feel like you are purposely not understanding what I'm saying, it triggers me. It's crazy. Like my daughter slamming the door when I'm doing a YouTube live, it triggers me, right? It's weird. But on the other end, I have this problem, and talking to my therapist, he actually pointed it out to me. I have a good trigger, but I use it in a bad way. And here's my example. Back in the day, before I, learned how to, be a better human, I wouldn't pay my rent until the rent was late, right? I know, sounds stupid, right? But I needed the rent to be late. I needed the eviction notice to be on its way in order to be motivated. That was the trigger. That was okay. So fast forward to today. I pay my rent on time, pay my bills on time. I'm a normal human now, but I seen the same trigger. I play poker. I have this thing where I'll go to the poker tournament and I'll play like a complete ass. I'll play like a donkey until I'm down to my last 300-400 chips. And then I absolutely lock in and play amazing. And I talk to myself, I write it in my book. Why don't you start from there? Like, why do you need that trigger? Why do you need that motivation to do what you know you need to do anyway, right? So it's weird how triggers work. It's weird how they work for you, and it's weird how they work against you, right? But depending on what's triggering me, definitely will depend on what I'm trying to win, right? Like, when the stuff hits the fan, and you gotta, it's crunch time, you gotta go. Some of us perform well, some of us don't. Well, that's one of my triggers. If I gotta do it, I'm getting it done. It's weird that it's like that. I'm recognizing it and getting better at starting. Hey Bruce, let's get started early. We don't have to wait till it's on your back. But that's my take.
I think one of the things, Bruce, that I hear when you say that, because we talk often as well, as far as like your reading, right? Reading books. Sometimes I think about all the books that I've read over the course of my life, and actually like long before I had any kind of resemblance of a career. But I was reading like trend analysis books, stock books, and finance books, and things that were helping to curate the environment that my mind needed to be in for the profession that I'm in now. And it's funny because a lot of people for the career that I'm in will be like, "Oh, you're lucky, right? You got lucky," and it's like, well. It doesn't matter how lucky you get if you're not prepared. Like you can be as lucky as you want to be, but if you're not prepared when that luck strikes, guess what? It's like playing a hand of blackjack. You bet $1 and you hit 21. You bet $500, you don't hit 21. Like that's not luck. You just weren't ready for the luck when it came. And so I look at like my current career and all the reading that I've done, and how that has sculpted me into a person who can actually like assimilate information in minutes, days, like whatever it is. Like if I don't know, I'm 100% confident that I can figure it out. But when I was younger, what I would do is I would procrastinate. And I think that's what you're talking about when you use that trigger. I would procrastinate until 11 hours before the paper was due. I remember once when I was in community college, I had a 7-page paper that I had to write. And I literally knew everything about what I wanted to write about, had thought about it, was ready to write about it and everything. And I waited until like 6 hours before the paper was due to start writing it, which then put an enormous amount of pressure on me to get that paper done. Now, did I get it done? Yes, because my trigger kicked in and said, hey, you got to get this done, right? But the downside when you use triggers like that is it builds up anxiety that can trigger negative triggers. My wife says this to me all the time, babe, and it's something that I've had to work on with her. And when we first started like having those more difficult conversations, was like, babe, your timing when you come to me about things is off. Like if I just finished working a 12-hour day, the last thing I need you to say is, babe, when are you going to take that trash out? Like, I'm sorry, I didn't get paid to go and take the trash out today, but I've been working for 12 hours and that's not what I want to do. I want to relax now because I've been working for 12 hours. And so when you put that, you condense that to that 6 hours paper, right? Oh, well, I've been writing a paper for 6 hours. I don't want to take out the trash now, or I don't want to spend time with the family. I want to spend time in a recliner and hopefully fall asleep. Like using those triggers for positive, and I use that very loosely, positive traction can create agitation on your negative triggers. And then you find yourself in an argument wondering why you're in this argument. Man, the day was going so good, but why am I in this argument now?
But not only that, Billy, you also, well, I'll speak for myself. What I did a lot of the times is I lied to myself, right? I had myself believing that it had to be on my back for me to do my best work. And I thought that was the way I operated for the longest time. And then it started with my career and actually taking work serious and becoming a better employee, climbing the ladder, blah, 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 blah. Now being a project manager at a pretty big solar company, I know the importance of starting my day with the hard work immediately. And I didn't know that I was trying to train. I don't know if train is the right word, or try to give my daughters the tools to not follow that path, because especially for my oldest, she's brilliant, but she's so smart that I'm definitely going to wait, Dad. Yeah. That paper. Yeah. I'm gonna knock it out, Dad. And I'm like, yeah, you gotta be, sweetheart. And B's are cool if that's what you want, but you're not a B person. You're not a B human. You're not a B student. And then when you ask yourself, did you try your hardest, Carissa? And is she honest? Well, no, Dad, not really. I just did what I had to do real quick to get it done. That feeling of regret later it never hits you when you're a teenager. We don't think, well, who cares? I got it done. I'm nice. You know what I mean? But what it did is it programmed me to believe that my best work only came in the witching hour, when that's not the truth, because now older, smarter, wiser, and have seen the difference. I've done both ways. I'll never go back because let's get up and get it done, because that's the only way to do it. But it's just weird how it works, and it weird how looking back, you see the difference of how those positive triggers were really negatives. And you were just programming yourself to believe that what you were doing was correct just because you were making it happen. It's crazy. It's a terrible cycle to get in, for real.
It is. It's an easy cycle to fall into, though. What you got, cousin?
I don't know. I mean, I would venture to say I'm a little older than the panel. Most of the folks on the panel. So, like where I'm at now is I don't try to win, with my triggers, right? My thing right now is peace. We were the question that was in the chat a little while ago, and Billy, you made a good point. You can't unring a bell. So when you respond to a trigger in a way that you hurt someone else, it's hard to come back from that. I've had to apologize to my sons. I had to apologize to my daughters before. It's not a good feeling. And you do it enough, then not only do you push some triggers on your kids, there's a lack of trust. There's a whole bunch of things that can emanate from, responding to a trigger in a way that's going to have such a negative impact on others. So my thing is, even at work now, I know I mentioned, my thing is just get to the point. There are times when I would spend an hour on a call with an employee who was trying to learn something, when I didn't have the time, right? I try to go out of my way to deal with triggers, even if it sets me back, right? Even if I know I gotta work an extra 30 minutes at the end of the day, but I want to give this person this time right now because I know it's a trigger for me. And if I respond the way I'm feeling, it's not going to be good for that employee. And the next time they have a question, an issue, a concern, they're not going to come to me. So I think I make a lot of reservations, a lot of exceptions when I'm triggered. A lot, and some of it is a way for me to get past the trigger itself, right? But I think I make a lot of exceptions for triggers sometimes, so that I can, I don't like who I am when I respond to triggers in a negative way. That's not who I want to be. I feel horrible when I respond to a trigger in a way that, because I know I can do better. I know I can respond in a better way. So I try not to win if it means me giving some concessions, and giving some concession and being okay with it. Not having that trigger something else, right? I mean, genuinely got to be okay with it. And I am. I'm just at a place in my life where, I just want peace, right? And it's just, and I'm not trying to win. I want everybody to win. I don't want to have such a negative impact, particularly because I just got my girls here, and like Bruce said, and Billy, you and I kind of alluded to this before. I mean, and boys are a little different, but they deserve some of the same attention and the time and the resources we give our daughters, right? But our daughters have a way of changing us in ways that we will. They just got ways of changing us for the better, right? And for me to lash out at one of them versus my sons, it's not supposed to be different, but me and my sons can go at it. And I just give you guys a quick example, is that my 15-year-old daughter and my wife and I both had to learn this, because my wife and I would be talking about something and we'll be raising our voices. It's a conversation. She's trying to out-talk me, overtalk me, and I'm trying to overtalk her. Well, my 15-year-old, she would start crying because she says, "We're fighting." And it's like, no, we're not fighting. We're just having a conversation. But I had to tell my wife, we have to understand what her understanding of a fight is. And I said, honestly, if she thinks us having a heated conversation is a fight, is a good thing, because that means we've done our job. She doesn't associate that with, us in here just beating each other, right? But it's understanding where other people are and meeting them where they are. And that's where she was at. So we had to kind of curb how we communicated about certain things because that's how she responded to it. So I try not to win with my triggers. I just try to, I try not to, hurt other folks. And I try not to have to apologize because it's just hard to come back when you put yourself in the position to have to apologize for the way you responded to a trigger.
Yeah.
That's such a great point, Brian. I don't feel, just reflecting on it while you guys are speaking, I'm thinking to myself, I don't ever feel a time where I won when I was triggered. You know what I mean? Like, a quick example, the company I work for, I've been there almost 4 years. They've only seen one Bruce. They've only seen one Bruce. And my triggers at work are plentiful because when I go to work, I go to work. Like I don't like small talk. I don't want none of that cooler talk. I'm not that guy. I don't care about the Giants, bro. I came to work, and that's just how I am. So, but one of the things that triggers me also at work is when people ask a question in regard for help and someone makes them feel small. I hate that, right? And that happened on a Zoom meeting the other day. And I've been at this company for almost 4 years. I've been in the office that I'm in for about 3. And for the first time, they see they got a quick glimpse of Bruce. And I was like, "Ooh, let me mute this. There's no reason." But that's what I thought. I stopped myself. I was thinking, Bruce, if you go, you can't come back from this. What are you gonna? There is no winning. Mute your mic, shut the hell up, and move on, right? Like, but that's one of the things that triggered me. If someone asks you for help and you're more knowledgeable, obviously that's why they're asking you. You don't have to make them feel small. It's corny, bro. It makes me angry. Trigger. My fault.
Yeah. No. You know what's funny is as I'm reading this question and as I'm listening to you guys speak, what are you trying to win with your trigger? I think the second question that comes behind that is can you win what you're trying to win without the trigger? Because that begins to give you a different tool. You're not using a hammer now. You're using a rubber mallet because you don't want to destroy your wall trying to drive in this little nail. I was thinking about earlier this week, so I do counseling sessions. And while I'm in counseling with this other person, the counselor said, well, Billy, you could help this person by letting them know when they're falling short. And immediately my trigger was like, hell no, I ain't helping nothing. That was my immediate initial trigger. But I sat with that trigger for a bit. And I sat with it for like 2 minutes. And it felt like 6 minutes. But I know it was 2 minutes because you pay for time in counseling. So I'm sitting with it for 2 minutes. And I wasn't thinking about what I wanted to win. But I was thinking about, why do I feel this way? Why do a person who does Wednesday words and does inspirational content, why would I be in a space where I'm like, hell no, I don't want to help this person? And once I sat with that, I was able to calmly just say, hey, I'd like to circle back to that comment about how I can help. And I want to let you know that that's not something I'm willing to do. I don't have a willingness to do that. And I was able to clearly articulate the reasons why I felt the way that I felt about not helping that person. And so I could have went the hell no route and triggered and started a shouting match during therapy, but that wasn't the goal. The goal was like, I'm pretty clear that this is not something that I want to do. And the trigger that it's triggering is you're trying to make me do something that I don't want to do. And you're never going to be able to get me to do that. And so identifying and understanding that trigger, and my wife will probably tell you I have a lot more work to do on that trigger, but identifying that and being able to say, okay, how do I communicate and win, not necessarily win not doing what I want to do, but win the fact that I communicated it and made a decision for myself not to do what I was asked to do. because that's the reality is though they're saying do it. And my wife, I say, sometimes you say things that you want me to do, but I feel like you're telling me to do something, and I'm an adult and you can't tell me what to do. And going back to being the youngest, Tim, as the youngest, you're told, hey, go and do this. Hey, it's your night to do dishes. Hey, it's this, it's that. And you're just kind of told a lot of things. And so now being an adult who's like, yeah, you can't tell me what to do, when there is that trigger where I feel like somebody's telling me what to do, sometimes I just have to take a step back and say, can I win this a different way? Can I articulate it a different way? And if they don't hear me the other way, not fall back to my trigger, because that's what we also do, is sometimes we'll try it. Hey, can you please not do that? And then they don't do that. They do it again. And now you right back to the trigger. See, I knew I'm going to have to straighten you up. I already knew I was going to have to straighten you. I don't even know why I asked you nicely. So,
I tell my kids all the time, you guys are really testing if I want to be the man I'm talking about wanting to be.
Right.
You're testing it right now, huh? Because you heard me ask you nicely. I used my calm inside voice and did nobody move. But as soon as I rage dad, as we call it, now I'm the bad guy, but everybody's doing what I need them to do. It's so weird.
Right.
Maybe part of the problem is we call it winning and we view it as winning. Maybe that triggers a competitive thing because there's no winners without losers. So when you win, there has to be a loser. Maybe it's more healthy to think about it as, does this get me to where I want to go? Does this accomplish what I want? Maybe it's as simple as putting that little Jedi mind trick on you, because winning means usually you have to beat somebody. And that's not healthy in these types of relationships. It's funny how, and it's funny, you said something, Bruce, about sometimes people say things and having people be disingenuous to you. And I think a lot of that, in my years of experience, not everybody's as articulate as I guess as the men in this circle. So sometimes you could be reading into what somebody says, and they didn't really mean what they said. It's just that's the way they articulate. And you go through this rabbit hole of analysis, thinking that there's a deeper meaning, and it's really what it was, very surface level.
No, Tim,
it didn't warrant all that.
Tim, you're so absolutely right. I've been with my wife for 20 years, and I'm the communicator, right? She'll tell me, and she will say something, and I take words literal, right? Like, you don't just come using words that you don't know what they mean. Do not call me things. Make sure you're being accurate when you speak to me. And my wife will say something that she thinks it means one thing, but it means something totally different. And she's like, oh, no, I didn't mean that. I'm not a good. And for the longest time, I wasn't smart enough to recognize, like you just said it. Like, sometimes you just have to understand that people out here trying their best. They're out here trying their best. Are you taking this the wrong way? And then I think me and Billy were speaking. We talk all the time, but he had said something about asking questions for clarity, right? I just so we're clear, are you saying X, Y, Z? Because I'm an overthinker, I'm sensitive, I'm emotional, so you can't just say nothing random to me, right? Because the triggers or whatever. And it's crazy how misunderstandings get blown out of proportion because people aren't willing to ask questions to clarify. It's crazy. It's great. And then that leads to a trigger. Now we're on a hamster wheel, running around in circles on the trigger train, just triggered. You know what I mean? It's weird.
The trigger train. So I want to bring this. Welcome back. I want to bring up this next question.
The internet connection is triggering right now.
They over there talking about stuff that's going to improve livelihoods. No, get them off of here.
Can't have that.
But I want to jump from the win to the manipulation, because, as I said, I feel like triggers are used as defense and offense, attack and defend. And the reason it's almost like the reason when I was a kid, right? You do something wrong, your parents give you a whooping or whatever they gave you, if they gave you anything. But what they didn't give you was gentle parenting in my day and age. So they gave you whatever they gave you, and it was to get you to fall back into compliance with what the rules and the regulations either were of the household or the greater world, whatever it may be. And I think in a lot of ways we use our triggers to manipulate. I mean, especially as men, I'm gonna be honest with men, we use our triggers to amp ourselves up when we're getting ready to get into physical conflict. Like, oh, you know, I remember I used to watch people walk in a circle with their shoulders touching, like walking in a circle. I'm like, why do they do that? Because if you even touch me when I feel like we might fight, it's a fight. You shouldn't have touched shoulders. That was your first swing was touching my shoulder. That was a bad choice in attack. So, but we use our triggers to manipulate compliance. And sometimes you see where that doesn't work out, especially like I said, with men who getting into physical conflict is a real possibility. I was talking to my wife about this in regards to also, Brian, why I am so like, let's just try to keep the words to the minimum. Like, give me the information that I need. And I said, because as men, the more words we add to something, the more opportunity there is for misunderstanding. And misunderstanding with men can lead to physical violence. And so I'm really like, hey, this is what I need. Can you provide that? Like you said, Tim, yes or no? I don't need the backstory. Well, if I could, I don't need all that. Just yes or no. Because if I say something like, well, you're never there. I remember, Tim, when we did your surprise 30th birthday party. God, when we've done 40th birthdays now. But we did your surprise 30th birthday party. I remember your wife calling me and saying, oh, we're going to go on this cruise and we're going to surprise him. And I remember saying, hey, like, not everybody's going to be able to do this. I'm just going to let you know. It's probably just going to be me and my partner. That's probably who's going to be. And she was like, no, they're going to do it. And so they were like, they said they're going to do it. And I remember when we called everybody to say, okay, it's time to get our tickets. And everybody was hemming and hawing. For me, I didn't have anything to say. I didn't have anything to say because I don't want to get into a physical conflict like, oh, you don't never come through. You always say you're going to do. Look, I make my decisions accordingly. If you show me that you're unreliable, I will not rely on you. It's that simple. We don't have to have a conversation about that. And I don't need to know your excuses. And if at some point you become reliable and I find that out, great. But if I never find that out, great. I'm okay with it either way. But how have you guys used your triggers to like manipulate that compliance, whether it be in your households, outside of your households? How have you used that as a tool? I'm going to say even more, probably more aggressively as a weapon to manipulate compliance in your houses. Glenn, you've been kind of quiet. I'll let you go first, man. What you got?
Yeah. As you were saying all that, I was really trying to dig deep on that to figure out where and what, right? Because my initial answer would be, I don't know, because I never even put thought into that. And I think that, and I say that because like right now, I'm in a season of dealing with I'm in a season of dealing with the beyond the surface of where those triggers came from, right? Like, so for example, I always thought that I was a pretty patient guy. And over the last 2 years, my kids have revealed to me or helped me reveal to myself that I'm not as patient as I thought I was for the last 30 something years. So over the last year, I've been very intentional with trying to really identify. So like, why does that trigger me? Like, what does that come from? Like really going back to, my childhood. And so I'm working through that piece of illness for myself. And so, I don't know. I would have to come back. I'm gonna sit on that question because that's a really deep question for me as far as being able to really connect those two. And thinking about the triggering piece. So my short question is, and I don't say this answer very often, but I don't know. And this is where I feel like while I bring value to the table, this is more of like, this is an opportunity for you to learn more about yourself. And so I'm gonna sit with that question though.
Oh, Glenn, I got you, bro. No, I'm here for you, brother. I'm here for you. I
I'll throw you the alley-oop.
Listen, it was perfect too, because this just happened to me yesterday, and I'm proud of myself for how I reacted. But the question is, how are triggers used to manipulate compliance in my household? I have a 17-year-old and a 19-year-old, and every Sunday since they were 8 years old, since the oldest was 8, they have to do chores on Sunday. And not chores like we used to have to do, take all the pictures down, dust everything, move everything out the china cabinet, wipe it all down, put it all, and it bet not be wrong. You better put it back like you found it. Like, they don't even do real chores, and I make fun of them all the time. But Sunday comes, I go to a poker tournament. I don't come home till 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. My grown-ass kids, nothing's going on in the house. And triggered, right? Because we talk about this every Sunday, bro. And instead of flipping out, I start singing a song, because your boy got vocals and all that. I start singing a song very loudly about how the grown-ups in my house are not cleaning. You know what I mean? Instead of screaming and cussing and whoop, whoop, whoop. But it's uncomfortable. I don't sing good. They don't like it. They like, Dad, you're singing again. So I'm singing this song. Lo and behold, my grown-ass kids get up and start doing what they need to do. But in the song, I'm singing, why do I even have to do this, right? Like, but that was an example of how, but I controlled myself. Instead of rage dad triggering, I got real melodic on them. But it sucks that I have to do that, because they know me. They know what I expect of them. They know the rules, but the teenagers, kids, man, it's almost like they need me to be the warden. I tell them all the time, I don't want to police you no more, guys. We've been doing this for way too long. And you know who I am as your dad. You know who I am. You know what but it worked out. They got up. My house was spotless by like 5 o'clock. By 5 o'clock, the house was real right.
I got a cup. Well, to me, this is like a two-pronged thing. So, to me, there's a difference between weaponizing your trigger to influence and weaponizing your trigger to manipulate. So, influence would be clear intentioned, honest, upfront. This is what the purpose of this is. Manipulation is kind of when you hide the end result behind. You play that close to the vest. As Bruce would say, you're holding those pocket aces close, so you're not showing them. But the intentions of the manipulation could be good, but it's still manipulation nonetheless. So, to me, I have realized manipulation, even when you feel it's working, it comes at a cost that you don't want to pay. And you don't know when that bill is going to be due. Example. In a previous relationship, I used to use this manipulation tactic that worked for me, where I can get this previous woman to do things for me because I would use the comparison manipulation. Oh, you know what? It's okay. I just expect you to kind of be like what I'm used to, because she would always just come through, and I never had to worry about that. And I would get what I wanted in the moment. But what I didn't understand is, even though I'm getting what I want in the moment, that dam is about to burst with all the resentment that I helped build up. So even when and that's a very easy one to follow, because when you're selfish, it hits you that way. But even when manipulating your kids to do good in school, right? And you hit them with all these things, and you're telling them, and you're not being honest with them, then it becomes they're doing it because it's important to you, when they should be doing it when it's important to them. And not being able to share that influence and influence them instead of manipulate them, it robs them of that, and you end up having to go back and make up time. And it's funny because you see, like, kids are smart, man. They know when that applies and when it doesn't. Like, I'll have similar situation with you, Bruce. Like, I have a rule in my house. Hey, look, if you're working and contributing in the house, that's the currency you pay in this house. When you're not working, you got 2 jobs, that of a student and that of a housekeeper, because that's your role. Everybody has to contribute. And as you get older, your contribution changes. And then I tell them the breakdown of why that's the case. and we have conversation. A lot of it is open. Like, I'll tell them, why do you think I'm on you about this? And it's interesting to hear their thoughts, because man, sometimes they will be way off. Like, my son, I got on him. I was like, why do you think I'm upset with you with your grades? Your grades are, your grades aren't where they should be. And he goes, because you're embarrassed. You're embarrassed at what my grades look like. And I was like, why do you think I'm embarrassed? And he's like, because if anybody found out you had a son whose grades weren't where you thought they should be, you'd probably feel like really embarrassed. And I was like, son, just to let you know, I give a fuck what anybody thinks about your grades. The reason why I care about your grades is because I care about what those grades mean to you in the future and how they shape what you want to do. And you have goals, right? And he was like, yeah. I was like, you want to be a veterinarian or an astronaut, all these things that kids want to be, that some grow up to be. And I was like, the reason why I'm on you about your grades is because you're not old enough to understand how important they are to you yet. Once that time comes, the transfer of power on that is going to be immediate. I'm like, I asked him, I was like, when's the last time you think I checked, when Matea was in school, I checked Matea's grades, my oldest, she's now 22. He was like, I don't know. I was like, when she was like a sophomore in high school, because once she got it, I didn't have to, once it became important to her, I knew I didn't need it. My role was gone. I transferred the power of responsibility. So there's a lot of power in that. So I would say, even if your intentions are pure and you're trying to help somebody better themselves, if you feel that you have your only recourse is manipulation, it's going to be short-lived and there's going to be a consequence that follows. So try to influence and then learn how to watch somebody fail, man. That's been hard for me. I always want to drag people through the success, but sometimes you got to watch them crash and burn because, like you said, Bruce, you don't feel that urgency to change until you feel that. The reason why you went through that, Bruce, is because that feeling cannot be manufactured. You can't fool yourself. You're not back in the driveway talking about 3, 2, 1, Kobe, and pretending like you're hitting the shot. You can't do that no more. You got to feel the live buzz and that live feeling that you can't fool yourself into feeling. It's that same way with this. Is you can't fake it. And when you do, it's going to come at a cost. And if the men in this circle are different. If you haven't been paying attention to society lately, we have two real big problems in the society. One, we have an accountability problem. Nobody is responsible for nothing that they do. And then secondly, we have an empathy problem. Nobody gives a shit about anybody unless it has something to do with them. So when you don't have those things and when you don't teach those things, when you manipulate somebody, they don't see it for the good you were trying to do with them. They're going to blame you for why they failed. And then that's going to be the thing that you have to deal with. So to me, a little bit of a long-winded, complicated answer, but to me, the question warranted it. I'll turn it over to whoever's next.
Cousin.
Yeah, that's a good question, and like Glenn said, that's a question that it gives you pause, right, to really think about. Triggers used to manipulate compliance. I can tell you, it's probably more challenging for me to understand when someone else's triggers are being used to manipulate me. I think turning that around a little bit, I struggle with that piece. But as far as me using my triggers to manipulate compliance, I mean, I sat here and tried to think of a time when I did that, and I'm sure I have. I'm sure I've done like Bruce. I walked through the house and said something snarky, but the kids knew exactly what I meant. To avoid for me going off, we're going to take it this way, and maybe you guys will get the hint and realize Dad is serious, and you guys can take care of what's needed to take care of. But to Tim's point, I think using your triggers to manipulate compliance and accountability are two things that I think, like my thing with in my house, everyone knows what the expectations are. I mean, I'm pretty clear about, my wife and I are pretty clear about the expectations. I have this thing that my youngest daughter says, my dad voice. I don't like your dad voice. So I think when that dad voice comes out, that's not a trigger manipulate compliance. That's a dad holding you accountable to the expectations. So I would like to think that I don't weaponize my triggers. I'm pretty sure at some point in my past I have manipulated a situation based on triggers. I just can't think of an example when that has occurred. But I try to focus more on making sure expectations are clear and people are being held accountable. If I can get buy-in or a commitment, I'm just going to hold you accountable to your commitment, right? That you previously committed to. But that's a very, very good question. And I mean, it could be dangerous too. I mean, to live in that space where you're weaponizing something that could be so powerful, because you can't always control outcomes. And when you have emotions involved, when you have physiological responses involved, anger, whatever the case may be, you may go down one path thinking that you're going to reach one result, and then at the end of the day, you find yourself in a situation you can't recover from, or has consequences beyond what you thought.
Right. Yeah. No, and it's funny because, like you said, you can't control the response. You're hypothesizing that your trigger will actually get you the result that you think it will get you, but sometimes it's like the I don't know the guy's name, the guy who punched the lady in the fried chicken store or the Polish dog store or whatever it was, and her son shot him. Like, he's amped up. Oh, well, I don't like when women talk down to me. And you're thinking that I think he said, if you say another word, I'm going to knock you out or something like that. And you're saying this thinking that it's going to get compliance because you're triggered. Maybe your mama used to talk to you strange, or I don't know what the situation is, but you're trying to create this situation where this person is now going to comply because you've given the ultimatum, right? But unfortunately, that person didn't comply. And that's not unfortunate for them. That's unfortunate for you, because now this person's son is in the room with a loaded gun. And now I think he died, if I'm not mistaken. So now you're dead and gone because you thought that manipulation of your trigger, don't nobody disrespect me, whatever that trigger was, you thought that it was going to lead to a specific outcome, and it led to a completely different one. I've actually had to address that with myself even in the last week. My wife and I were having this heated conversation, and I found myself, I've tried to really make it where when I'm in a heated conversation, to your point, cousin, that I am aware of my tone. Like, I try to be aware in the sense of not yelling, not screaming, not pointing and jabbing at people. That just doesn't work well for me. It doesn't work well when people do it to me, so I assume it doesn't work well for other people. And I got to a point in this conversation with my wife where my voice was elevated, and instead of taking a moment, because like we said in the private chat, I am a human. Instead of taking a moment of saying, how do we win? We, in this case, my wife and I, how does our marriage win? It was like, no, I raise my voice because I feel like you're not listening and you're not hearing me. And if I don't raise my voice, then you interrupt me and I don't get to say what I want to say, but you want me to sit here and listen to what you have to say. And that is really, truly that manipulation, because I'm using this trigger that triggers me. I feel like I'm not being heard. I feel like I have something to say, and you keep interrupting me and stopping me, but then get mad when I interrupt you and say I don't listen. So I, in that moment, validated that trigger to use manipulation for compliance. But in hindsight, that's not the way that I want our heated conversations to go, because I assume we'll have more heated conversations. But that's not the way that I want them to go. I want them to be more calm and more, they'll still have the heat, but just more calm and casual in the tone and the pace in which we communicate, because there's difficult things you have to communicate when you're married or when you're an adult. And the reality is we do this, like you said, Bruce, we do this all the time. We deal with multiple triggers at work, and we don't flash on people. Now, the younger me, I used to flash on them at work. I didn't care. I'll get another job. But the older me is like, this is not a big deal. I can move beyond this without having to trigger you. But part of that trigger, I'm very aware, comes from growing up in the Heights. Like, hey, yo, I couldn't be soft in the Heights because soft people got their milk money, their popcorn money, they bake sale money, all them buddies was gone.
Flower tag money,
right? They pogs was taking everything. so because of that, I realized that there's times where when things get disrespectful, that chip is right there. It's like, oh, you want me to insert my coin? No problem. I got next on Street Fighter. Yeah, let's go. I got you. But the problem with that is, and this is why I actually ended up leaving my not my previous job, but the job before that. The problem is when you walk around with that, you start talking to yourself. And when you understand these thoughts become manifestations in reality, all of a sudden you're like, why is the sheriff taking me away right now? I remember when right before I resigned from my not my previous employer, but the employer before that, I felt extremely disrespected by the person I reported to. And in that moment, I said, the next time he comes for me like this, yeah, it's going to be real physical. And I said, that's not the way I want to go out. And that day I resigned. I didn't quit on the moment. I gave him a notice, but I put my resignation and was like, hey, I can't do this. I can commit to the next 3 weeks that regardless of how disrespectful you are, it's never going to be physical. But I knew internally beyond that point, yeah, I can't get down with that because it's going to lead to a physical altercation. And that is going to set me so far behind for so little gain. Like it's going to be like negative 1,000 to 1. I'm not trying to go negative 999 steps to get back to 0. So because of that, I've learned, like, though you can manipulate through compliance if you want to and use those triggers if you want to, I believe the Bible says know thyself. And it goes back to what you were saying in the beginning, Glenn, as far as being able to sit with yourself and know who you are and know what you're capable of and know what your value is and know what your worth is. And to be able to say, yeah, I'm not about to discount my value over this person's lack of respect for all people, not just myself. And so, go ahead.
Well, then in your example, asking yourself what's the win, right? Recognizing that no, like you said, know thyself, knowing that this could be worse. And how do you equate anything that happens after I lose my shit to a win, like to a victory? And that's why I have to tell my daughters. So yeah, you get to give them a piece of your mind. You get to tell them off. But after that, what did you gain? You know, especially in the corporate space and in the workspace. As much as I want to tell Billy Bob how dumb he sounds when he's sounding retarded or whatever, what does that do for me? Nothing. And how does that help me get the job done? Right? It doesn't.
Right. But that's the challenge. And then to dig into where triggers come from, a lot of them are going to come from our childhood and the environments that we're in. And that is not necessarily just your home environment. That's your neighborhood. There's actually, I was talking to one of my current coworkers about where I grew up at in Sacramento. And she was like, oh, I just seen a documentary on Del Paso Heights. She said, what era did you grow up? What era did you grow up in the Heights in? I said, the era they were talking about. I'm 100% positive. And she said, the 80s and the 90s? Yep. And like I was telling her, like, you know, I was in the house that I lived in. There'd be times where I can walk out the front door and see the sheriff raid lined up on the side of the building across the house, across the street, getting ready to bust into a drug bust. So you take that, and I always tell people, I'm like, hey, if you're gonna come to my house, that's fine. Just call me before you come, because I'm seeing sheriffs lined up outside of houses, but I'm also learning about home invasions and things that are taking place in my neighborhood. So now I don't even live in a neighborhood where they're doing home invasions. But if you come to my door and I'm not expecting you, I'm not coming unarmed, because I didn't hear of any home invasions where they allowed you to run back and go and get your weapon so you could defend yourself. So because of that, I'm learning that trigger for me, why that trigger is important. But I'm also looking at, do I resolve the trigger and then don't come to the door when there's somebody coming to the door and we're not expecting company? Or is it still also my priority as the protector of this household to be in a position to protect it? And so there's times where I feel like my triggers are using other aspects of my character to manipulate me into allowing them to stay and allowing them to be present. And it's hard. I still don't have the answer to that one. So until I have an affirmative answer, the affirmative will be status quo. I will be ready in the event of needing to defend my household and the people that I love and care about. But it's a challenge.
Yeah, I think you say some good points, and I think the reason why that chip on your shoulder with the disrespect is there is because the area we grew up in and the era we grew up in taught you that the moment you allow disrespect to enter in, you're going to gain more of that. Do you want to keep getting more, or do you want to, do you want to fight the dragon when it's beatable, or do you want to have everybody? Because then once there's blood in the water, the sharks come. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's very poignant. You said something earlier, Brian, where you were like, your kids told you about you having conversations with your wives, and it's funny because I had that same thing happen to me, and what I told my daughter is I was like, it's not necessary. It is arguing, but it's not. If this is what you think is arguing, then you're in a good spot, because I want you to break it down. Did I call your mom out her name? No. Did I threaten her with violence? No. Did I take the conversation outside of what the topic was? No. Did your mom do that to me? No. What you got to understand, that we're two competitive people, passionate people, and this is how this comes sometimes. However, pay attention to it in your life, in your arguments. When people go off the topic and they start saying disrespectful things and start attacking you in a level that's not in the spectrum or in the gauge of the conversation itself, then that's not healthy. So there's funny how all these teaching moments come. But as y'all were talking, it made me think, like, when have I been manipulated, right? And the thing that always got me as far as manipulation was if I was made to think I wasn't the protector I thought I should be, or the provider I thought I should be. And I realized that maybe I'm speaking for myself, but maybe it's men in general, that we all, no matter how confident we are, there is insecurities in that, because that's what we're meant to do. So I've had that happen to me in a previous relationship where it's like, if that happened, I don't know what would happen. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know what happened? And then you start asking questions. Do you think I wouldn't be able to protect us in that situation? Or do you think if that happened, you don't think I'd be able to figure it out a way and provide? And it's funny when you, like, once you realize that's the angle somebody plays, it becomes funny, because then you get to start diving into the things and you start thinking, okay, is this a relationship I want to continue? And it's actually can look quite healthy. But those are the two areas that I get on. And it's only a select few that have that ability to manipulate at this point. I've reached the age of my life where somebody that I know doesn't have the investment in me, that doesn't know me, can't really, I'm like, okay, you're just an ignorant person. You don't even know what the hell you're talking about. So I don't put a lot of weight into that. But that's when I think about it. Where I've been manipulated in the past is where someone questions, someone that I think shouldn't questions like my my ability to provide, protect, and in some cases my intellect. So that I realize that about myself. Thank y'all for helping me with that.
Yeah, no problem. Well, we're now, man, this has flown by, and I'm lightweight sad because after this, I got to go back to work. But we are at the 20-minute mark, and so I always want to start shutting down the conversation at that time, so it gives us time to give into the key takeaways. So let's do some closing thoughts. Glenn, since you haven't spoken in a while, what's your closing thoughts?
Yeah, I'll say number one, I appreciate you guys' insight and transparency on this particular topic. And so this is an ongoing thing for me. Like, this is, as I mentioned to Ro a couple of days ago, like these sessions are very therapeutic. While I'm sure you guys aren't like licensed, but I believe that it's communities like this that when they're pieced together with like-minded individuals, there's more good that can be done, right? And like I said, I think one of the biggest things, like as we're talking, or more so as I'm listening, is like, what lessons can you take from this to pass down to, whether it's your household, whether it's the community of that next generation, whatever it is. Like, these are conversations that need to be had, and I'm just grateful to be at the table.
Appreciate you being here, brother. Bruce, what do you got?
Okay, I'm Bruce. I love the platform. I love the thought-provoking conversations. I love that every time we have this conversation, I'm on the panel or I listen to the conversations and I'm in the live chat. I love that I leave with something to work with. But I think that I would like to leave everyone with something just to think about. In identifying triggers, in trying to combat them or control your emotions, I think the biggest key for all of us would be something Tim touched on, being open with yourself, right? Like, one of the best things that I think I have going for me is that I have uncomfortable conversations with Bruce all the time. Like, I'm always trying to better myself. It allows me to be a better father, a better brother, a better husband, a better project manager, because I don't have a problem with telling you what I see that could be lacking, because I don't have a problem with telling myself that shit. I also don't have a problem hearing it if it's coming from a good place, right? And from people who matter, right? Because someone always has something to say. But I think being okay with being accountable with yourself, that accountability mirror, looking yourself in the mirror and being okay with processing the feelings that we as men have, right? We've been programmed to believe that our feelings don't matter, so they suck it up, walk it off, men don't cry, all the shit that we've been programmed to believe. But in reality, we're all just humans. We all go through the same life on the same planet, just like all of us do. And what we really should do is get to know oneself, right? Go through those feelings, go through those emotions, reflect, and figure out a way, come up with a plan and work the strategy, because triggers, emotions, feelings, these are all things that are scientifically proven that we have control over. So don't pass the buck, be accountable, hold yourself accountable, look yourself in the mirror and get your shit together. That's what I tell myself every morning. You know what I mean?
I'm with it. Cousin, what you got?
Well, I mean, I wish, well, going back a little further, I wish there was someone in my life growing up that, I think, Billy, you mentioned dropping breadcrumbs, right? Someone that was dropping breadcrumbs to me growing up. I had a ton of uncles, one brother, a dad, had a lot of men in my life, but there wasn't a whole lot of positivity passed down, right? And so, unfortunately, as a result of that, you kind of figure things out on your own, and that's not always the best let's just say hope isn't a strategy. That's not the best way to really, figure things out. And I think as a result, I've had some pretty profound experiences. So I've kind of had to figure things out. Even this men's circle, if this was around 20 years ago, I think I could have benefited from, having these kind of conversations if I felt comfortable even 20 years ago to do it, right? Because, like you said, Bruce, we weren't built this way. We weren't raised this way to have these kind of conversations. So I do appreciate that there is a platform uh, for us to come together and be open and vulnerable and honest and share our collective experiences. Because what I find is that I find that I find something out new. I find that there are similarities, right? Okay, I'm not the only one who experienced some of this. I think, now that, I'm a little older, I look at things a little different. I certainly react to things a little different. Root cause analysis is part of my work life and my home life. So I'm always asking why. That's something I do regularly. Because when I get down to the bottom of it, if the why is me, then I need to pivot and work on some stuff to make sure that, things are right in my life. So, I'm not so presumptuous to think it's about everybody else and never about me, because there are times where it has been about me. But I mean, like I said, Billy, I just appreciate the opportunity and the platform. And I think, like I said, these conversations, I walk away having more internal dialogue, because I didn't have a whole lot of internal dialogue before, right? It was like stuff happened, I'll deal with it, right? So now it's like, wait a minute, stuff is happening, but why? Or, I'm preventing things from happening because I'm having these conversations. Is this worth it? Is what I'm about to do worth the consequences or the result on the other end? And if it's not, we're going to pivot and do something different. So, like Bruce, I always walk away with some nuggets to take, walk away with some nuggets to apply just to my everyday life.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, is it worth it? It's
Yeah.
like Def Comedy Jam. Damn, is he funny? Damn, is it worth it? I'm good. I'm cool. Go ahead, brother Tim. What you got?
Man, this is another home run for the men's circle for me. But my takeaways from this, or my final thoughts are, triggers got a real funny connotation to it. Like if you tell somebody I got triggers, they're looking at you like, oh, you a delicate flower. You look at you got all your Mr. Sensitive and all that. But what I realize is, yeah, are there some people that are easily triggered? Yeah, but you could say that about anything. Everybody's on a spectrum. Some people more sensitive than others and all that. But triggers to me make you human. And it's okay to have triggers. And what triggers really are to me is they're opportunities for learning about you. And you're either going to take those opportunities and be proactive, or you're going to have to be reactive. And it's funny, my brother, he told me this. My brother, real quick, he had the biggest impact on me because he gave me no bullshit. He told me the flaws in his life, and he told me, he's like, listen, like my older brother would say something, and he'd be like, listen, that's all a lie. He hates his life. He was like, you want to grow up like us? This is the shit that you're going to, and he would like cut it down. And that stuff is what really stuck to me. And one of the things he used to say, man, to me is he would say, hey, listen, man, God's going to give you the lesson enough times until you learn it. And what I think he means by that is, with this triggers is, you're going to keep experiencing the triggers until you do the work on you to figure out what's causing them in the first place. And if you don't do that, you're going to be in that cycle. You're going to be on the carousel until you're willing to step off. And when you step off, you might be dizzy for a minute. You might have been on there for a little bit. But you got to take it, regain your footing, and you'll be all right. If you're curious at all about what's causing your triggers, you're already doing better than 95% of the population. So keep on that. I encourage you to.
I'm with it. I love it. Closing thought for me, man, and as everybody's sharing their closing thoughts, I'm thinking about, Tim, you probably just put that the best, is triggers do make us human. And not only do they make us human, all of our triggers are not just from our childhood. We actually acquire new triggers as we get new experiences. Being in sales, hearing people say, no, I'm not interested in your product. You get 100 no's in a day and 2 yeses. That can create a trigger over time. Being a father, experiencing new things with this child that you're responsible to raise, that can create new triggers. Being a husband, being a partner, being a leader, being a man in your community. Right now, I am apparently the communal dad in the community in which I live. People come to me to get their bikes fixed at this point, and I'm like, where are your fathers at? Why are you coming to my house asking me to use my tools? What's going on? Like, where's your dad? But it creates triggers in the sense of not just like, oh man, these kids are coming to my house, but it also creates some triggers in the sense of kind of like this regret that going back to the breadcrumbs, cousin, like, dang, there wasn't a house that I could go to and be like, yo, do you got some tools, and will your dad come out and help me fix the radiator on my car? Like there wasn't a lot of that where I grew up at. And it's funny because like I consider Tim's parents like my parents. So, but I wasn't going to their house saying, yo, I need you to help me fix these things. It was like, hey, if I needed something to eat, you guys had me, and I could stay the night, and I could come over early in the morning and walk to school. Like, but there wasn't a whole lot of people in our neighborhood where it was just like, you can go and get what I call that wisdom of the elders from. And who knows, we were kind of all knuckleheads back then. So it's not that we would have even stopped at those places to get that wisdom, but there wasn't a lot of places to stop and get it. There were not a lot of oases in the desert. But overall, like the triggering events tonight has really caused me to reflect on some of the conversations that my wife and I have had where I can say I've been wrong. And dang, I hate saying that because we have to give each other kisses when they write. So, but I've been wrong, and there's some things that I need to work on in regards to my own triggers. Because at the end of the day, what I want to win is a healthy relationship. And if I continue to rely on the triggers to try to guide that or manipulate that or even influence that, I can't foresee the relationship being as healthy as it could be. It could still be a healthy relationship, but it won't be as healthy as it could be. So that's what I was thinking about in regards to the triggering events tonight. Definitely a much needed conversation. I just think the community in itself for the men's circle is a much needed community. And then the conversations just happen to add to the necessity of the community. But as always with the men's circle, I do want to share a couple of the takeaways that I've pulled out of tonight's conversation, just things to think about. And I actually have an exercise that I would like to share with the group. But key takeaway number 1 from tonight was trigger events are an opportunity to display who I emotionally want to be to my future self. Bruce, that came from you. I 100% believe, like you said, Tim, if we gonna keep running into that lesson, there's an abundance of supply for the lesson. Please believe. So if you want to keep learning and not learning how to deal with the trigger, that supply will be unlimited for you. Key takeaway number 2 is don't let the consequences force you to work on your triggers. Do not put yourself in a space where the consequences of your actions from triggers are forcing you now to make the choice to work on the trigger. You're going to be in a much more relaxed and productive space if you're working on your triggers proactively without having the pressure of looming cases or looming debt or looming bill collectors, or like Bruce said earlier, waiting for the eviction notice to get the rent paid. Put yourself in a proactive state. Don't put yourself in a reactive state. Takeaway number 3 is learn the timing of your triggers. It's not that you're not going to be triggered, but if you can understand the timing when the trigger starts, you don't get to the place where your trigger explodes because you're aware of it a lot faster. You can actually see, oh, we're heading down this path where I would feel like she's not listening to me. I feel like I'm not being heard. You'll see that a lot faster, and you'll be able to navigate around that trigger and get to the point of the matter is, hey, babe, for me, in my case, babe, would it be better to have this conversation at a later time? Because I feel like right now, neither one of us are hearing each other. Now, my wife will tell you those are what her words are typically to me. And then sometimes I'm still all in, just for the record, transparency. The key takeaway number 4 is you can win without the trigger. I think sometimes we back ourselves into a wall thinking that we have to win with the trigger. This is why men get into so many fights, is because it becomes a pissing match, an ego match, instead of just like, okay, apparently this was a misunderstanding and I'm willing to walk away from this because I want us both to get home safely. Imagine if you because that's the overall outcome. That's why we get into the physical altercation, is because I don't feel like I'm going to be able to walk away safely. So now I got to beat you up to where you can't hurt me, and then I can walk away and make it back home. The outcome is I want to get home safely. And because I want to get home safely, and now I'm making it, I want you to get home safely. Now we can both win with what we're trying to win at, which is getting home safely and feeling safe. Key takeaway number 5 is you cannot ignore triggers away. Goes back to that lesson carousel that Tim was talking about. You can think you're ignoring it away, and you can think that you're controlling your trigger by ignoring it. But at some point, those triggers will compact or compound. And then you're going to find yourself with a nuclear trigger when somebody hits something and all your triggers go off at the same time. And then last but not least is number 6, key takeaway number 6, you cannot manufacture compliance. Tim, I couldn't get that thought 100% right, but I love the fact that you were saying about influence and manipulation in regards to triggers. And that people, man, woman, boy, girl, doesn't matter. People, they do what they want to do at the end of the day. And if you want them to be willing to do something, that willingness can't be manufactured externally. It is something that is manufactured internally. You can give them examples. You can be a mentor, a role model. You can do all those things. But the inherent desire to do has to come from within. And so when it comes to triggers, just be aware of the work that you're going to have to do, or not have to do. You don't have to do anything. The work that I recommend you do is going to be the desire to do that work is going to have to come from inside of you, not from the men's circle, not from 5 people having a conversation, not 5 men, not 20 men, from inside of you. So be willing to do that work. And when you have that willingness, then do the work. Don't procrastinate on it. And last but not least, there's an exercise that I want. And Glenn, you talked about this earlier. It's about sitting with yourself. And so you thought you weren't contributing, but you were absolutely contributing tonight. And at first I put this as an exercise of just sit with yourself for 15 minutes to reflect. But I think it would be more impactful, especially casual, if you're still with us live. You said you had a day today and somebody triggered you at work today. Sit with yourself. You're in the aftermath now. Your mind is a lot more calm. Your adrenaline is down. Your stressors have been lowered. Sit in the aftermath for 15 minutes and ask yourself those 5 whys. Dig down deep in those 5 different levels of why. Figure out why you were triggered, and then figure out why that triggers you. Figure out where that originated from, and continue to dig down, sitting with yourself in that aftermath to find out this is where that trigger originates with. And it will actually help you with the key takeaways, especially learning the timing of your triggers. You'll learn, hey, I need to take a 15-minute break. I just had a call where a customer cussed me out on the phone. It's time for me to take a 15-minute break, because the next person who calls with even a sneakling of an attitude is about to get the business. Even if it's where a lot of people used to put them on mute and then they, and then they come off mute. No. Be willing to do that work. But that is part of the work that I would recommend all people do, but all men do, is to sit with themselves, especially in the aftermath, for 15 minutes and find out if that's the person that you truly want to be. And if it is, then be that person. But if it's not the person you truly want to be, then work on solutions that will help you move away from being that person and the thoughts that you need to have in queue so that you can manifest the things that you want in the reality that you're seeking. So that's what I got for you guys tonight on this men's circle. Tomorrow, Wednesday Word, it's a premiere because I'm on vacation and I'm out of the country. So it will be a Wednesday Word premiere. You can catch that tomorrow. It will air as a pre-recorded Wednesday Word at 7 o'clock. No, that's my time. No, that's right. So I don't know what time. Check social media. This is wild. I done forgot the times of my own stuff, but it'll air 7:30, maybe 6:30. I don't know. Find out. You'll see it on YouTube in a bit. But the thing that I'm actually really excited about is in the month of September, I'm actually going to be hosting a micro conference for the men's circle in Sacramento, California. It's going to be on the 24th of September. I'm still working on the location. I have a location in mind, but I have to just make sure that I can secure said location. But it will be the 24th of September. It's going to be from probably about 10 till about 3 p.m. So it's going to be a full, well, I call it a half day, but it's a full day conference where we're going to really be diving into communication. We're going to be diving into the challenges that we have. We're going to have some face-to-face conversations that we would probably have on the men's circle. And we're going to also have the opportunity to build that accountability that you were talking about, Tim, by being able to meet each other outside of the virtual world and face-to-face. Then you have, the true, what I consider the true brothers keepers, to where you can actually interact with each other and call each other and lean on each other in those times when you're struggling. So stay tuned for more details on that. But until the next time, I definitely appreciate you guys rocking with us live today. Casual, thank you for your wonderful questions. Joe, thank you for tuning in live. But until the next time, if you like this video, share it. If you share it, like it. We are always happy to engage with you in the live chat, and we are happy to engage with you in the comments up to the first 7 days. Then after that, we move on to the next content. But until the next time, one love, peace, and God bless. Thanks for sitting on the first row.